Hi, welcome to Homeroom. I'm Shelly Leer, and I'm in here in my shop. Nobody's around out there. This is great. I wish you all were here and you could be sitting up here and watching me in person. But what you can do is sit back and relax and get maybe one of your favorite drinks, coffee, tea, a cocktail, water, juice, whatever. Because you are not going to have to take any notes at all. You can watch this, and I have a complete tutorial on my website of this written out in a PDF. So you can have that to look at. So you can just enjoy, and on this Thursday night in quarantine, learn how to upholster your dining room chairs like a pro, so that when spring pops and we get to be outside, I should say spring has already popped, but we get to be outside, then you're going to have all your chairs redone by that time, right? And maybe even guests can come over. So wouldn't that be a treat? Okay, so I've been teaching upholstery for about 12 years, and I did upholstery for close to 25 years. But now I'm just teaching, and I've been a writer. I've written a book, and I've written online, and so I'm going to show you how to do this, because you can get professional results with a few tips and techniques that maybe you don't know. You might know, but maybe you don't know. And there's a big difference between what looks kind of homemade or amateur and what looks professional. And it's not that hard to learn how to do it. And I know you can do it. So I'm going to show you some of those things. I teach a 3-day boot camp in here, but I also have a number of online classes. So when I'm talking to you, I'm just going to talk to you like you're my students right in here with me, okay? So my project is to recover these 6 chairs. I have 6 of these. This was my dining room set, and this is really off of here. I pretended like it's going to, I'm going to have to unscrew it, but I really don't. And I have another seat already torn down. But this was a set I got a great deal on it, and I've recently moved from a house, and I've had these in storage. I just brought them down here this last weekend, so I thought it would be a great sort of wrapped seat to show you how to redo. So you unscrew the screws underneath there, and your seat will pop off. Whoops, that's not quite undone. So let me get that last screw out of here. Where is it? Oh, it's out. It's just stuck. There we go. Okay, so this is just a flat slip seat, okay? I'm going to show you everything you need to do to redo this. But the first thing I want you to know is you don't need to invest in like bona fide upholstery tools to get the job done. You can use things you have around your house, or you can borrow some stuff from neighbors or whoever. But when I first started doing upholstery, I simply used this flathead screwdriver instead of a real staple lifter. And I bought these pliers at the hardware store back then, and I used those for probably 20 years. And of course scissors, good scissors, and I'll show you some of the other tools as we get to them. So let me show you one thing. This is the staple lifter that my students use now, and it's got this little split end on it, and it gets under tacks and under staples to pop them up. But you don't really need this. This thing will work. If you want to invest in this and you really realize you love upholstery, then I'd say go ahead and do it, and they last forever. Okay, so safety, safety, safety. You always want to have glasses on, whether you've got glasses like mine or your safety glasses. You do not want anything coming up, and pieces do break off and come up and flip into your eyes. So, well, they don't really flip into your eyes, but they could. So wear safety glasses, or if you have, little tiny reading glasses aren't really big enough to cover this area. So you need to be careful of that. We don't want anybody having anything in their eyes, especially a powered staple coming into your eye, and you don't want any staples going into your hands. I've had very, very few accidents down here. A few people have gotten some staples in their hand and it hasn't been that bad, but we don't want that to happen. So in order to show you proper technique, and I know this camera is not right up on top of here, but you'll get the gist of it. So I'm going to use this thin flathead screwdriver and my pliers. And I'm just going to come in, and I know from this seat how easy this is. I don't need to get up here and get under each staple to pop it up. And when you're doing your chairs, you can go ahead and test and just see how easy it is to get these out. And if it's not that hard, then come up with an efficient way that you can get under here. Like this will just pop up. You don't really want it all to rip because it's a pain to pull it up, but as I said, famous last words, there. And I'm not going to take all of this out. I just wanted to show you how you can use that to pop those up and out of there. The deal is, if you have your hand here and you're trying to get a staple lifted like this, 9 times out of 10, you're going to slip and jab that into your hand. Believe me, I've got scars all up and down here. So if you can remember, always keep that hand away from a tool coming towards it. And you're always also pushing away from you too. You don't want to be having that coming anywhere near your body. Always away from your body. So anyway, I'm not gonna go to all the trouble like I said, but as I get started, it's kind of fun to start ripping it off. So, okay, I gotta stop. So I'll show you the cleaned up chair. Okay, voila. So this is a flat wood seat. Not all your chairs are going to be solid like that. Many of them, especially if they're newish, have a cutout space in the center, and then they've got what's called sinuous springs attached to clips, and they are attached here and here. And what it does is it comes up in a arching shape, and it mimics a crowned seat. So without getting into a lot of upholstery history, which I find interesting, but you may not really find it interesting, sometimes these crown seats sometimes those springs are flat, but oftentimes they're arched. And the arch is to look like it's old-fashioned coil springs that were tied down, the 8-way tied springs. And they were trying to mimic that look by giving those springs that arch. And they're not bad, they're just on more modern pieces. So if you take your seat apart and tear off the fabric and you tear off the padding, you're going to end up seeing something that probably looks a little bit different than this. But for now, this is fine. We're just going to cover a flat wood seat, and the other side of this is different than most. It has this little ledge around here, and that's nice because the fabric that you will add to it will pull around and staple onto that little lip around the edge. The other thing about this seat is it does have one little interesting thing. It's this little notch in here. And so that's going to present just a little bit of a challenge, and I'll show you when we get to the end how to get the fabric wrapped into that so that this can slide back into the seat. And this is where the post goes. So this needs to be flat in here. This fabric cannot be sticking out. You have to get it down in there so it goes along the curves or the line of the chair. Okay, so you're going to have that. Now I wanted to show you what I took off of the other chair, of that seat. This just had a cotton batting, no foam at all. And then it had this red, actually I did this red piece on top of here. And I'm gonna tell you something in a second. And then, I don't know why I put that little piece on top of there. And then I put the cream and brown houndstooth on. So the backstory of this was, I was writing for apartment therapy and I needed a quick project. I had these chairs and I wanted to show how to cover dining room seats, but I did not want to go to the trouble to tear those all the way down. I just wanted to show the technique to add a top fabric to it. No good upholsterer would ever put fabric on top of fabric. I did this strictly for that post I did. So do as I say, not as I do. Anyway, so that was the reason that there's 2 layers on here. But often, if you take apart bigger chairs, side chairs, you'll find 2 layers of fabric. People just maybe tried to do it themselves and they did not want to go to the trouble to tear off the first layer. But always tear it down, tear off all the fabric. You don't always have to tear off the foam. If you have padding on your chair that's in pretty good shape, leave it, because foam is expensive. And oftentimes, if the chairs aren't that old, the foam and the Dacron on top of there are practically brand new. So don't be quick to rip that off and start fresh. On these, this padding, you know, it's seen better days. Now, it doesn't smell. Sometimes people bring chairs in here and the padding has been sitting out. They've been sitting in a barn or something, or in, I don't know, a basement. They've gotten really musty smelling. So we strip them down to the bare bones to start over. So that was what we had there. I always hang on to the old fabric. I try to hang on to the old padding if it's not too bad, just in case, until we get the new stuff built back up. So I'm going to put that aside. Now, this, I've got some of that in my face, I guess. This project, like all DIY projects, consists of 3 parts. And the first part is, you've got to plan it. You've got to understand all the tools you're going to need, all the materials, any other supplies, and have them near you. You know how frustrating it is to run around and gather stuff as you're working on something? So I try to get everything I need and put it to the side. The second thing is you have to do the prep work. And you know, the prep work is just not fun, but you have to do it. So that's the second part. And then the third part, of course, is building things back up again. And that's the fun part. That's like when you get to roll the paint on the wall and see the big difference. So another thing, then I'm just going to relate this to the classes that I have and the students that are in here. We go through a 3-day class, and after the first day, they've been painstakingly tearing their chairs down, and they're a little bit tired and, you know, maybe kind of bored with it or whatever. And as soon as I can, as soon as they get it built up enough where we can put a piece of fabric on it, I get them to do that, because that gives them a big boost. And I don't jump the gun on it, but I do want them to see that there's going to be something really exciting at the end of that. I mean, 3 days is a short amount of time, but they're in here working really hard and they want to see that there is going to be some reward. So, okay, so now you've got your chair frame, okay? And you check it over to see if it needs any repair. This one needed some of the nails tapped into that little edge right there. So I did that. Sometimes there's a crack in here, and you will have to go back and cut a new piece of wood. You can't use a cracked seat on that. You can't glue it, don't brace it, don't do anything. Just cut a new piece of wood, get somebody to do it for you, or get a jigsaw if you have a jigsaw, that's what I use, and just cut out the new frame. And then you won't have to worry about it. In fact, I will tell you, I believe one of these chairs has a cracked seat that I am going to have to replace. Okay, so the next step is we're going to, this is a little bit of, here's a trick, or a tip I want to tell you about. Every time I come up with a tip, I'm going to mention it. So on these flat seats, often when you get the fabric on, it's just so flat, you know, it just looks so flat. And so one trick is to take a little 1-inch piece of foam and cut it in about a 10 by 10 square and put it down here on top of the wood, which will go underneath the 2-inch piece of foam that'll go over it. And that'll give it a little bit of loft, and it will just look a little bit richer and kind of comfier. Well, it will be comfier, actually. On these modern chairs, which this is really a set from the 50s, instead of putting a 1-inch piece of foam on here, I'm going to just add this little piece of cotton batting, which is just like the stuff that I took off of there, but this is brand new. And I'm going to just put that little piece of cotton on the base. And then on top of that, I'm going to have a piece of cut foam, which I'm going to show you how to do, and that will go down on top of that. And then we'll put a layer of Dacron on there, and then it will be ready for fabric. But I just wanted to give you a heads up on what's coming. So I've got this 2-inch piece of foam, and I will tell you it's probably not as dense as a piece you would want to use, because a seat needs to have a dense foam because it gets a lot of wear and tear, especially kitchen or dining room chairs that you use every day. This is a 2-inch piece I had, so for the sake of not having to go out and try to find foam, which I don't think I could, well, I guess I could go to Joann, I'm going to use this. Okay, so I'm going to try to find the straightest edge, which I can tell right now is right here. And I'm going to take the longest edge of the seat and put it right up here. I'm going to scrunch it over because I like to save the foam if I can. And I'm going to let there be a 1/2 inch overhang here. All right, now here's a tip. I'm going to tell you this tip. You want to cut foam a 1/2 inch larger than your seat frame. You always want it larger. As the foam is compressed and wrapped, you don't ever want to see that wood edge, the fabric roll around and have that wood edge there. You need the foam to come out just a little bit, and then as you compress it, it just kind of bends over and covers that harsh edge, either on the front or on the sides and back. The front part of that, the important part is you don't want to feel that hardwood edge behind your legs when you sit down. And if you're sitting down and you can feel that wood behind there, then somebody needs to recover those seats, actually. So I'm going to leave a 1/2 inch here, and I'm going to take a permanent marker, and this is a little tip again. Instead of coming in and tracing this right up to the wood edge, I'm going to just bump this let me see how, put this Sharpie right up here and roll it along there so there's a little bit of a distance between the tip of the pen and the edge, and that'll give me that 1/2 inch I need. So I'm just going to bring it down, come in, and I've got that little groove there, so I've got to go around there. Okay, now that gives me that little extra. Perfect, it's perfect. Let me show you. See? Okay, now the next step is you do not want to try to cut that with scissors. You're going to need an electric knife, and I have a foam cutter that's an upholsterer's foam cutter, but I'm not going to use it for this. I'm going to show you how to use an electric knife and cut this straight. What you don't want to have happen is that you start cutting it and this blade is moving back and forth and you're gouging out the foam. You want to keep it as perpendicular as you can. And honestly, I didn't have an upholsterer's foam cutter for 18 years. I used this all the time, but then I had a friend who stopped working in the upholstery business, and she bequeathed me her foam cutter, which is not a cheap piece of equipment. And so I use that now, but I want to show you how to use this because almost everybody can borrow one of these. I think I got this at Macy's for maybe $15. One thing I have plenty of down here are electrical cords going every which way. Okay, there's a little button in here, a little safety to, so I'm just gonna, I don't think it's gonna hurt the table, but I'm gonna be careful. Come on. Okay, see, I didn't push that all the way through because I didn't want to cut up my table. So now I'm just going to come in there and trim the rest of that. Like your if you don't have any power tools yet to play with, this can be your first one. Not in the kitchen, but out in the shop. Okay, now see those little notches? I don't know if I can finesse that little tip of that in there, so I'm just going to take the scissors and snip those out. Okay, there's that. Now it's the hard part. Not really. What you need to do if you are not sure of yourself on this, the goal is we are going to take a 45-degree bevel off of the top of the seat foam. So I'm going to angle that knife and slice off a 45-degree angle all the way around. If you're unsure of using that freehand like that, come back and just measure a 1/2 inch back from the edge here and here, and then keep your knife blade right along that line and you'll get that 45-degree angle. I've done this enough. I know that I can pretty much do it, and get this, it does not have to be perfect. The great thing about upholstery is if you have a little bit of a waver in foam, you're already going to have other padding on top of it and fabric on top of it. If you have a giant gouge in there, it's going to be bad, but if it's a little bit wavery, it's not going to be the end of the world. So, okay, one of the reasons why you do this is because if you have ever shopped at a thrift store or the Goodwill back in the olden days when we used to go thrift shopping, and sometimes people would cover a cushion, they would just take a block of foam, wrap it with fabric, and it was this block just covered in a loose fabric. And honestly, it did not look good. So what you want is you want a nice, tight, rounded front, pulled down snugly. And what you're doing is compressing that foam so that the fabric is taut on there and the foam is compressed inside of there. And if you have those loose blocks of fabric that people do because they don't know what they're doing, what happens is the fabric is loose and it starts rubbing and there's a lot of friction in there. The foam will break down. and the fabric won't last as long either. So the finished product should be a nice tight seat, which I don't have. I'm not going to cut out the notch. I'm not going to bevel that notch edge. That's not that important. There we go. Now, here is, I didn't do a perfect job, but I'm not going to sweat it, to tell you the truth, because I know that as the process goes on, it's going to be fine. Okay, so that foam is cut. If your blade on your knife starts getting kind of slogging through the foam, you can use, this is something I get from my supplier, but it's a silicone. And just spray it on the blades and it will start zipping through there, because the blades get a little bit warm and that kind of heats up the foam, and it gets, as my old next door neighbor used to say, it gets gummy. I don't know if she meant gummy, but anyway, it gets sticky. And so this is sprayed on the blades will help that. The only problem is this silicone and my adhesive are similar in color, so we have to be really careful not to get those confused. So I didn't use the silicone. I'm going to put that over there. Okay, now, oh, here we go. So I'm going to take this, flip it over. Now remember, I'm going to put that cotton on the underneath side. I don't really need to put any adhesive on there. We're going to have that adhesive is going to be around here, and it's going to be tight, so it's going to hold. I'm going to put spray adhesive here and spray adhesive here, let it get a little sticky, and then I'm going to press this and make sure that I have the same distance all around, ½ inch, and press on it. And then it'll take a little bit, but then all of a sudden it will be stuck together. And then the seat will be ready to cover. So there is a foam at Joann. Well, you know what? Forget that. I'm just going to tell you. You can use my supplier. I use Sunshine Foam, and I can put this on my resource page on my website. Sunshine Foam in Cincinnati will ship you supplies. You will pay retail price, but you can get all upholstery grade supplies from them, and the woman's name is Deb, and she would be happy to help you. And I've used them for 25 years, and they ship my supplies to me. So this is a high performance spray adhesive, and it works beautifully with foam. And if you get it on your hands, it's really a sticky mess, so you have to have a solvent for that. So I don't want this on my table. So it comes out in a fan sort of spray, so it does shoot out a little bit, so I'm going to be really careful. You don't need to soak it. Put that there, and then, well, here, I'm going to put that over there too. That is toxic too. When I have classes going on, everybody has to go outside to do the spray. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now, if you get it on there and you can tell that it's off center or it's out of whack a little bit, you have a little bit of time, you can pull it apart. But after a while, if the foam is adhered to the wood, it will stick to the wood and kind of take chunks away from that foam. So if you know that it's not right, fix it as soon as you can. Okay, I'll let that sit for a little bit. Now, one thing I want to do before I get to I'm not ready for the fabric, but just now I want to do it because I need to have it done. We need to find the center of the front and the center of the back. So I'm just going to take a measurement. It's 19, So we'll do, you can hear a big motorcycle out there. So it's 19, I'll do 9.5, that's center. Usually when you do a center mark and you come back, you'll find that somebody else, the previous upholsterer, has already marked center. And then the back piece is 14, so I'm going to hit it at 7. Okay, I'm going to use this because when we put the fabric on, I'm going to have a center mark on the fabric. That needs to end up here, and the center mark on the back needs to end up here in order to keep the fabric aligned. It needs to keep the grain straight. So that's another little tip. Sometimes if you don't know where the center mark is, you can kind of shift it a little bit, and if there's a design, you get really messed up. But even if it's a plain fabric, you can tell, sometimes you can tell that it's a little bit off because the grain is out of line. Okay, so now, all right, so let's think about this. If you had 6 chair seats to do, which sounds overwhelming, but it's not really, I would batch these. I would tear them all down at once, and I would cut out all the foam at once. I would cut out all the Dacron. I would get everything ready and have it set aside. And then you can just, once you get going, and you will get really much better at this after you do 1 or 2 of them, you'll be knocking them out really quickly. So if you have them all lined up ready to go, it goes a lot faster. Stick, stick. See, it's not really sticking there. It's not crucial that it does stick because it is going to have enough top layers on there to hold it in place, but we do want it to stick. Okay, now I want you all to take a 1-second time out. I need to go turn my furnace off so it's not going to make so much noise. So take a sip of your drink and stand up and shake a little bit. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. So that's all ready to roll. Now we're going to add Dacron to this. This is Dacron. You've seen this before. If you don't want to order this from an upholstery supplier, you can use quilt batting from Joann. It's not as thick and as even as this is, but in a pinch it will do. And again, this is a modern seat on a modern piece. You don't really want it super puffy, and you don't want it really, really rounded and cushy. In fact, the 2-inch piece might be a little bit thick for this, but it's fine. All right, so the next thing is, now you've added new foam, you need to take a measurement from the widest point on the bottom of that wood up and over to the bottom of that side of the wood, okay? Don't take it in the middle. You won't have enough Dacron if you do that. So just bring it around, and it's 24.5. I'm going to write that down because I forget. And then front to back. It's 22.5. Okay, so at this point, I would instruct my students to go over to the back room back there and cut a piece of Dacron that measurement, that size. This was one I already had cut, so I'm going to go ahead and use it. It's a little bit bigger. All right, now, here's the deal here. There are many right ways to do upholstery, and there are many wrong ways. So bear that in mind. One thing that I always learned when I was trained was that this was incorrect, and that is this. Bringing this around and stapling it on the bottom. I learned a billion years ago not to roll it around to that edge, because the reason is when you have staples and you have fabric rolled around there, you'll see those little dimple marks from the dacron underneath. So my instructor always said to either, you can do one of two things. You can put some staples right here in this front edge, or you don't even have to staple it down. You could put spray adhesive on here and roll this around and cut it short of the bottom. Cut it just at the bottom or a little bit short, and the fabric will come and hold that in place. But just to show you, I'm going to go ahead and put a few staples in to hold it in place, all right? And the thinner the chair frame, the harder it is to get a staple right there at the bottom edge without splintering it. So you have to be careful. And again, you guys, this is practice, and it's not going to be perfect the first time or maybe even the 5th time, but you will get really very good at it very quickly. It's not that difficult. So I'm going to plug in my stapler. If you can, I would use a pneumatic stapler that plugs into an air compressor, such as that. It's lighter weight, it's easy to use. It was not even as expensive as this, but of course that needs an air compressor. But for my classes, I don't have a gargantuan room with a big air compressor for everybody to use. So I use electric staple guns, and this particular one is very powerful, but it's very heavy up here. And they don't make it anymore, but I'm going to use it for you guys. I would not try to use a manual stapler. I just wouldn't. I think it's a pain in the neck. All right, so, and again, the other thing about this is, and I tell my students this for me is all about how your body can hold it and work it, because you have to use your hands. Your hands are your best tool. Your palms are your best tool. You have to push this and roll it down snug and get a staple in that front edge, and then come around directly to the back, okay? Smooth that up, push that corner, that top corner down, that beveled edge, pull it tight, but not so tight that you rip the dacron, and then put a staple there. That came up a little bit higher than the bottom edge, but I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to get a couple more staples in there. Here's another trick. This is a big trick. As you're smoothing dacron or fabric around your chair, don't just come straight over. Use your hand and push it over and at a diagonal out towards the corners. Because as you're pulling this down and you're smoothing that evens up that top edge. If you just pull it straight, you start getting little pleats in it, little puckers. But when you use this smooth out and at a diagonal, it evenly pulls that, whatever it is, whether it's dacron or fabric, it pulls it nice and straight across there. But as you can see, I just use my body mostly. Okay, and we're going to stop about this close to the corners. We've got to deal with the corners on their own. So this whole technique you can use on benches, piano benches, bedroom benches. You can find a coffee table and make a padded top for it. If you get good at this, people won't even know that you did it yourself. So do you see what I mean about as I pull that Dacron, that holds that foam in place. Okay, before I get to the sides, I'm going to go ahead and trim some of this off because it's just in my way and annoying. People ask me if I save these kind of scraps, and to tell you the truth, this stuff does me no good. I don't really use this. Sometimes I keep a little bit of a stash of some of this, but otherwise it doesn't really work for new pieces. I might have cut that a little bit tight, but it's okay. One of the other lines I use, because I probably repeat myself in every class I do, is that there's almost no mistake that you can't remedy in upholstery. There are some, but almost everything can be fixed. I'm going to come back when this is done and trim this all flush to the edge so that when the fabric rolls around, it will have a little bit of the Dacron behind it where it rounds that corner, but it won't be right up against the wood, and the Dacron will not be completely on the bottom. So back in my day when I did this for other people, I could, if I had all my supplies cut out, all my materials ready, I could cover a seat in 5 minutes, and that would be building it up and doing the fabric. I can't do that anymore, but you know, when I was in a rush, I could do that, and when everything was lined up and ready to go. Okay. The armchairs on this set are a little bit different. They're trickier. And when I first did them, I probably didn't do them the right way, but now I know. They needed to have a little sewn gusset. Yeah, that's a whole other thing. I'll tell you about that another time. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and finish this corner, and it's not very hard to do. You just pull it up tight, and right at the corner edge, well, you know what? Wait a minute. Because every seat at the front corners, the fabric pulls down. Take a little bit of soft fluff. This is kind of like it's kind of like a pillow stuffing, but it's even softer. So I just take a little tiny piece of that and put it right up under there. This is an upholsterer's trick. And then when the fabric comes on top of here, it won't completely crush it down. It'll have a little bit more of an edge, because you need to make a fold right there. And if there's no edge or corner to make a fold over, then people struggle with it. Okay, so what I was saying before I stuffed the corners was I'm going to pull this up tight. Then I'm going to make a very, very, very tiny little fold right there. I can put a staple right there if I want to. I'll do it. And then I'm going to cut out, you have to be careful here. I'm going to cut out this part that folds over because that's kind of doubling it up and it's too much. So I'm just going to take a little cut out of there and then bring that corner up. Wait 1 second. You don't know right now, but it'll be just fine. There. Okay, see that corner is right there. Now, when I put fabric on top of that, there's a little tiny divot right there. Well, all you have to do is just take another little piece of that, just stick it on there, and then that fabric will come over there. So let me quickly finish the rest of these corners. You guys can run to the bathroom if you want to, and I will be ready to get the fabric lined up and start attaching that. The back corners have the notch in there, so I'm going to do a little finessing. I'll show you. I don't need to put fabric in those back corners. All right, so here's the, I don't know if you can see that. That kind of goes in like that. I'm going to go ahead and pull this up tight and get a staple in right on the bottom, just in that one spot. And then I'm going to go ahead and trim. Like that. I'm going to leave that because I don't want to add a bunch more staples to it, and the fabric is going to come in there. And we've got to worry about that more than the decor. Okay, so it's going to look like a little marshmallow seed, and get all that. Okay, this is a time too when you might want to just, with your hands, just kind of smooth it out. You can do a lot of, as my friend used to say, massaging of the foam and the dacron to get it even. Like as I look at this right now, I can tell that it's pulled a little bit tighter here than right here, but I'm not going to worry about that with the dacron. I'll have to be more careful when I put the fabric on to make sure that's straight across there. This side's a little bit puffy. Trim that up. Okay. Woo, that's going to be comfy. All right, let me move this, and now I'm ready to show you the fabric. I should not have my hands on my face. I've got them clean, but it's just fiber particles. I have a whole shelf back there of fabrics, and I tried all different fabrics with this chair seat. What I discovered after all these years is it's really important to have the fabric look good with the wood color. So a lot of times people just put fabric on their seats and they're not taking into consideration the color of the wood. Now, I'm sure all of you do that, but I don't think that was something I thought about that much. But with that blonde wood, it's not everything looks good with it. I'll tell you what did look good with it was like a peacock colored blue velvet, but that's not really my taste. So I am going to put on here this Glen plaid, which I think looks really sharp on there. I already had this piece cut, so I'm going to use it. But what I want to tell you, a little fabric 101 or textiles 101 is this is a loose weave fabric, and I used it for a mid-century lounge chair, and I sent the whole bolt off and had it backed with this sort of net backing, and that stabilizes the loose weave. So when I was upholstering with it, it only stretches so much now because of that backing. When I try to do this, it's probably going to be rocking and rolling all over the place, but I'm going to do my best with it. So, and when I did the chair, I had to use a level to see how that plaid went across there. I mean, that was hard. So the next step is you're going to want to decide what you want for your center. Okay, if you have a fabric with an obvious print on it, you definitely know where your center is going to be. But now you've got a plaid. You could have the bold stripes, the bold plaid come down, parallel, or you could have it in the center. This is cut so it works in the center. So I'm going to do that. But do you remember how I measured and marked center on here in the back? Well, now I'm going to mark it on the fabric so that when I pull it, I know where center is and center is in the back, because as I said, it's a loose weave, and so that plaid is going to be shifting all over the place, and I've got to be really careful to keep it in line this way as well as that way. So if I was probably smart, I would not have chosen this to show you, but on the other hand, why not, right? Okay, so this is easy because there's like 5 little houndstooth checks across here, so this is the center one. Otherwise, I would just fold it in 2. I don't know why I'm trying to rush this through. I know that if you want to watch this back as a recording, there's no problem. I feel like I want to show you how fast you can do this, but okay, so I'm going to take a little notch out of here in the center, and same over here. Now this fabric, every fabric has a top and bottom to it. Some of them are not detectable to the human eye, in my opinion. I can't tell which is top and bottom on this. On velvet, you definitely can, because it's a nap and you can tell which is the shiny side and which is the darker side. But on this, I can't tell. So I'm going to go ahead and line it up. Now, if you had like a big motif on here that you wanted as the center of your dining room chairs, you would decide where you want that. Let's say it's a big floral and it's a big repeat. So you'd have to decide how, do you want that up towards the front? Do you want it smack dab in the center? You've got to be really careful to keep it the same when you're doing 6 chairs. You don't want one so you have the center of the flower here and then this one is just slightly off. It drives most people crazy, but maybe you could live with that. This is going to be a tight squeeze. Let me see if this side works better. Nope, it doesn't. I don't like that. Okay. All right, so here's the gist of stapling fabric on seats. You always go top, bottom, center of the side, center of the side. Then you work out from the top 3 or 4 staples. You go down to the bottom, you work out 3 or 4 staples. You come side to side, work it out, and you get up to within about 4 inches of the corner, maybe a little bit closer. And then you have to do your finesse work on the corners. So, folding corners can be a real challenge, but once you get it, you really don't forget it. But it can make people kind of go crazy. I just want to make sure I've got this where I want it. It's going to be a little bit short on that side. Oh, so I forgot to tell you this. So what you want to do is when you're cutting your fabric for your chair, I already had, this piece was just this size, but if I was cutting it out, I would measure, like I did for the Dacron, I would measure bottom edge to bottom edge on the sides at the widest point, and the same thing front to back, and then add 4 inches all together. So you'll be adding 2 inches on all sides. That's called pull, and it's exactly what it says. It's a pull for you to pull it snug. You've got to have something to pull on, because if you by chance took the old fabric, like that old fabric that I put on there, that has already been trimmed up. And if I used that on a new chair seat with new padding, there's no way that's going to cover that whole thing and have enough to wrap around. It's not even the same cushion as it used to be. So you have to take new measurements, and you have to have enough to grab and pull to get that leverage to get the staples in. Now, there is another thing you can do. If you're skimping on fabric and you are running out and you don't have enough, but you know that you can, like, look at that. That is like down. I might have to rearrange this a little bit. But if this came down here and I needed a little bit extra, you can sew a piece of scrap fabric along that edge and pull it down so that you don't see where the seam is. You just see the top fabric. But that pull, you still needed that pull down there. See, this is too short. I'm gonna have to do it the other direction. That's okay. You just have to make adjustments and figure it out as you go. What I loved about upholstering, now I know like a lot of old-timey upholsterers who are, on the brink of retirement or they've retired, but I also know a whole slew of new upholsterers. And some of the old-timey ones, they were so ingenious on how they made things work. I mean, they would make tools in order to just, if they didn't have the right tool for the job, they would use their grinder, their bench grinder, and just create one. So I do love that about those old-timey guys. What I don't like, and what I've never liked, is that they've been a little possessive about their knowledge. And I feel like, they were like the gatekeepers, and they still, if you talk to any of them today, like, I'm not going to teach anybody how to do it. They'll be my competitor. It's like, it doesn't work that way at all. I mean, we all need to know these crafts. Okay, so I'm thinking this is going to work just fine. Oh, it's going to be so hard keeping it straight though. All right, so now I've got to hold it and flip it. The good thing is I can get that, I see those notches are over there. All right, I'm just going to go by the plaid center here because I don't have it cut. So I'm going to pull it to get my first staple in. If you're not sure of how tight it's going to be, you can not push your staple gun down so hard. You can kind of bump it, like let it bounce up a little bit, and then that staple won't be so hard to pull out. So I'm going to pull that. This one's going to be fine. So I'm going to go ahead and go for it. Do not staple right at the edge, and you don't need to staple way back. We've already got this little border here, so I'm going to shoot for halfway, like halfway on that rail. Okay, so I have one in here. That seems to be pulling a little bit snug, so I want to get a couple more so it evens up that tension on there. This is stuff that if any of you are seamstresses or you're just familiar with fabric, you know how sometimes the fabric dictates what you have to do. But I always say, excuse me, I say make that fabric your bitch because you can control it most of the time. All right, so now I need to pull this. As long as I have that center mark, I think I'm going to be okay. See how it, okay, see this? That's all going to be smoothed out by using the palm of your hand. Your hand or my hand. So you want it snug, tight, compressed, but you don't want it cinched so hard that there's no way that you can smooth it out. And that comes with practice. I hope that I'm talking so much, I hope I'm not making this seem harder than it is. I just want to tell you some of the pitfalls so that if you come across them, you don't feel like it's hopeless to salvage it, because it never is. Okay, this is where I'm doing the smoothing out and over, and the good thing is I can see this line, I'm keeping in line with that design right there. That doesn't always work, but that's a good sign. That's pulled a little bit snug. Oh no, I see. Now, if you have outdoor porch furniture that has seat pads on it, upholstered seat pads, or even outdoor patio furniture, you know, you can get some great sunbrella and get those covered and ready for outdoor weather. I mean, you know, playing around outside. Okay, I don't want to go all the way over. I need to go back to the other sides here, but I got carried away. I'm not hating it, as they say. This is where, if you're doing this and let's say you're in your basement or wherever you're working, and you just start getting frustrated, you need to stop, walk away, go for a walk, I don't know, go get a snack, whatever, come back to it and start again. It gets to be a little, you get obsessive about it, kind of like I'm just right now, and you have to learn how to manage that. I can't tell. Oh, there I got it. This plaid can make your eyes kind of go nutso too. That's hard keeping that line. So you know what, it won't stay completely straight because, like I said, a cushion by its very nature is going to slope down at the corners. And as it does that, the plaid will go down. and go down, kind of, you know, go off the grid. So here's an FYI. If you want to get a staple gun, there's a place in Cincinnati, another Cincinnati place called Nail Gun Depot, and they have upholsterers staple guns for pretty good prices. The pneumatic ones, they sold me these, but they don't sell these anymore. And there's another brand called Maestri. It's an Italian electric staple gun, and it works really well. I mean, it feels a little bit more like Play School than this one does, but actually those have lasted longer for my years and years of classes in here. Those Maestri staple guns have lasted longer than these have, and they are a little bit cheaper. Well, actually a lot cheaper. Okay, so I've got the front and the back. Not really crazy about this back part. Oh, here, I got that. Yeah, I got it. Ooh, that feels so good when it works. It probably would have been better if I would have had that backed fabric, but what the heck? I needed a challenge. Okay, now I'm going side to side, but I have to take the sweater off. I'm burning up. That's the other thing. It gets really, it's a workout. Whew. Okay. So here we go. Now I've got to be careful to keep that lined up. Oh, my eyes. It's like crazy. So do your best, just smooth it and try to get the center line as straight as you can. If you were doing a plaid, I hope none of you would pick a plaid to do. I'm going to give you a little troubleshooting tip in a second. It's not bad. What was my troubleshooting tip I was going to give you? Oh, if you are doing a seat cushion and you don't have the fabric pulled tight enough and you sit down on the seat and it underneath your legs, it like bags up, you know, it wrinkles up, you have not pulled it tight enough. Now that usually happens with like side chairs more than these chairs, because these are easier to get tight since you're working, you know, you've got it off of the chair frame. And you know, here's another tip. As I recall, this fabric, I mean this foam I got, I was wondering about that foam. I didn't recognize the color of it. It was a piece of foam that was came as like to cover a mattress. It wasn't the egg crate stuff, but it was a flat piece of foam that I got somewhere that was supposed to be a mattress, you know, to add to your mattress. And it was way less expensive than upholstery, you know, real foam from my supplier. I know, I'm sorry this is taking so long. It feels so good to do it though. I have not covered anything for a while. Like it. I don't want to get too close to the corner. All right, now this is it. I'm going to show you how to do a corner here. This is probably the best way. Okay, here I am. I'm going to also stick in a little bit of that stuffing, just a little bit. That's just so I can form the corner easier. Okay, here's another tip. And I will tell you that on one of these chairs, I saw that I did it wrong. I must have done this a long time ago. The fold on the front of a chair, you should never see a fold like this, open, where you could see into the fold. It should always be the other way around. So the fold is over on the sides. That's just standard. There's a lot of standards and rules in upholstering, and what the purpose is. I mean, that purpose is pretty obvious. You just don't want to look into a fold. But I noticed that I did do that on one of the other ones. Okay, so I'm gonna pull this tight with my hand, smooth it, and as I come around the corner, I'm gonna pull it just a little bit around the corner, not much. Okay, now I have to cut this back. Now, if you have an ice pick, you can use it if you have anything that is like a sharp point. You're going to use that. Wait, where's my corner here? Okay. I'm going to pull this across, and I want to make a really nice little tight crease, a little fold right there. But that stuffing I put up in there is kind of wanting to come back out, so I have to tuck that in. And then fold it. Ooh, there we go. Okay, I'm taking this and I'm getting a nice little tight crease in there. Oh yeah. Perfect. Oh yeah. So you don't want a big long fold. You want the fold to be as short as it can be. Okay, this is called a regulator. And this is an extra short one. They usually come longer. What this is what it was originally used for was when upholstery was padded with vegetable fibers and horsehair. And when you came up to a place like this, you can come in with your regulator and regulate the stuffing. So you can move it around. If it's not in the right place, you can kind of move it underneath there. Sometimes these things are too fat and they would hurt a delicate fabric, so I use a finer tufting needle, or sometimes I use a long pin. But if you need to just move some stuff under there, that's what that's for. Okay. All right, so I got that front corner. I'm going to do another one. I'll just be quiet. If you take fabric off of an old piece, most of the time you don't cut out your new piece with grooves cut out of it. Sometimes people think that, let's say this chair seat, I take this off and I see there's a dip out of here. And I think, oh, if I cut my new fabric with that little scoop out of there, then it will fit just right. But that's not really true. You need to, for the most part, upholster and trim with one whole piece of fabric. Those little cuts and gouges and slices are done once the upholster is fitting the fabric onto the chair seat or whatever the piece may be. The exception to that is oftentimes with mid-century modern, the upholstered covering is sewn and it's a pattern. And in that case, you cut out, you take it apart and you cut the seams exactly where they're going to go, because the seams have to be in the same place. But the extra fabric that might roll down over the bottom, you don't want to trim that up. But let's say there's a seam across here, you need to make that covering have that pattern, the exact dimensions of that pattern. Sometimes the front corners can get kind of like protruding, so you just want to take your hands and smooth it out a little bit. Okay, now, this back edge, here's what we do. Let me trim this. Now I'm not cutting so much that I won't have enough to work with. I'm just trimming off a lot of excess. Okay, so here's our little groove in here. See that? I'm going to take this and pull it up tight. I'm not putting any stuffing in there. I'm going to pull it up tight like that, and I'm going to get a staple in, again, just like I did the Dacron, right in the center. Then on this, I'm going to make a little fold. I need to, again, push that stuffing back down. I'm going to make a little fold right there. And on the other side. You'll see why I need to do that. See how that's kind of thick right there? I'm going to go ahead and staple it down just to hold those cut edges a little bit more. going to do it again. You know what, before I do that, I'm going to add a few more staples over on this side. It's not quite ready. Okay. So just pull it up in that notch, tight. Now before I fold, I'm going to trim. Make my little fold right there. And make that other little fold right there. Trim it up. And trim the front. So you don't want to trim so close to the staples that if it had somebody sat on it and that fabric had, tension on it, that it would pop through the staples. All right, I don't know how it's going to look yet, so let's take a look. Beautiful. I see that needs to be tighter. Okay, so when you look back at your work and you're like, oh, don't feel bad about it. If you need to come back and take some staples out and reconnoiter it a bit, it's not the end of the world. Here's what not to do. If you see that there's like a pull or something and your fabric is delicate, it's not worth it to come back and dig a staple out if you're going to rip your fabric. Probably nobody is going to notice. Now, having said that, I do know that a lot of women, sometimes me included, are perfectionists and just can't stand to have something that, not for the sake of that anybody else is ever going to notice, but just that whole perfectionism thing. And that's why upholstery is so great, to let go of perfectionism, because if you start tearing everything out again, which I used to do, in fact, I'll tell you my craziness. Sometimes I would lay in bed a night before I was going to deliver something, and I would agonize over a mistake I had made. And even though probably nobody would see it, I would get up and try to redo it the next day. And I had to put an end to that. I mean, that was just killing me. That was a psychological nutso thing. So I got over that. And I know that most people don't see minor mistakes. And the other thing is on chair, okay, so look at this. I'm up here on this, my eyes are like right here. And I'm like, I see every little bump. When this is on a seat down here, my eyes are not at that level. Nobody's eyes are down there at that level. But what's bothering me is that the plaid feels like it's kind of gotten, oh there, that worked a little bit. Twisted. Okay, good enough. Now, folks, here's what we do at the end. Whether it is a chair that's being closed up in the back or something like this, we're going to write our little time capsule on the back of that, okay? And I have come across many of those through the years, and it's really fun to see who did the chair, what year it was, and anything that is a little bit historical about it. Sometimes my students will put a coin in there from the year. They'll tape it inside. Often they write a whole big thing on sometimes I give them a piece of canvas and they write it on the canvas and staple it on the inside. But I am going to write on here that this is for Indie Mavens. Coronavirus 2020. April. And then I'll put my name. And Indianapolis. Indiana. And then that's on there forever. Okay, but we're not done. The last step, this is where we separate the girls from the women. This is when you put your final dust cover on here and people will go, dang, that is totally professional. So I cut this out about 1 inch wider than the chair frame. It's a little bit big, but what you do is fold it under and begin stapling in the center, but you don't want to take the fold up to the front of the front edge, because you can sometimes see that black cambric if you're looking at a chair. So you want the black to be a little bit like halfway back from the rail. And come across. So this stuff, by the way, interesting fact, it's a fused fabric. It's not woven. It can be used as filters for these COVID masks everybody's making. But what happens is, if you're stapling this and you get it twisted, it's done for. You can't take staples out of this without ripping it. So you just very carefully cover it up. I'm trying to think of all the things that it's like my kids going off to college. I'm trying to think of all the things I didn't tell you that I needed to tell you about. I can't remember if I said this at the very beginning. When you are taking your dining room chairs apart, number the seats and the chairs so they coordinate, because the holes for the screws are meant, they're probably only going to work on that chair. So if you have chair 1, put seat 1, keep that in mind. Another tip is, if you get to anything beyond a seat cover like this, use your cell phone and take 1 billion pictures of how it comes apart. I swear that's the best way to learn how to upholster, is from taking things apart. It's like a puzzle piece. And you take the back off of, say, a wingback chair, you take the back off, and all of a sudden you see how all those pieces came together and how they were cut and pulled around the rails. And even though you probably need more than that to learn how to upholster, it helps a lot. And the other thing about taking pictures is, you can take fabric off of a chair and 5 seconds later you can't remember where that came from on your chair, because when you get the pieces off, they're just blobs. Oftentimes they don't have a shape that you recognize. See how I got this a little bit twisted right there? You know what? I can't stand it. I got to get that fixed. So I'm going to carefully get that staple out. Oops. Smooth it. Better. It's still a little wrinkly. I'm going to trim this. Okay, so as I'm finishing up, I'm going to tell you guys that if you go to my website, this chair seat tutorial is on the resources navigation tab, and my website is thehomeroomshop.com. There also is a tutorial in there for a no zipper boxed and corded cushion. That one is not that's posted as a blog post. No, that's posted as a product. It's a freebie online product, that tutorial. And then there's a bunch of other classes, online courses that I started teaching online courses in 2013. So they need to be they don't need to be updated, but I'm working on a mid-century furniture class and a zippered box and corded cushion class for online. But I'm also going to do a cushion class in here live this summer if we get back in action. I love having studio classes because it's kind of like a lab, and I can see how people are doing and what they struggle with, and also, most importantly, learning styles, because I could have a class of 5 people in here and they all learn completely differently, and teaching people how to do a skill really isn't the same as just teaching a knowledge-based class. Neither one is harder or better, it's just different. But I like to see in person how people, how they work. Okay, so now I'm going to put this on the chair and we'll see how it looks. Probably aren't going to be able to tell because the lights are so bright. Okay, remember, remember the little notch in the back? So those notches went right around. Oh, look at that little. See that? That's pulled a little too tight. I'll probably fix that tomorrow. But anyway. I love it. It's so tailored and sharp. Looks like a man's suit. Now I have, if I find the other chair, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more to do. I don't know if I lost it. Oh, I love it. Okay, also I need to do a little touch up on this wood up here. All right, that's that chair seat. Okay, so I also want to tell you, if you have any questions about upholstery or anything, email me at Shelly Leer, Leer, @gmail.com. If you're around here, if you're at the Gallery Pastry Shop or you're anywhere, pop in and say hi if I'm here. I don't keep normal hours. I'm down here, I might be working from home in the morning, but when things open back up again, we're going to start our Thursday night craft socials again. So I teach some of those, and then I have some other teachers come in and teach some classes. And we were just getting ready to do a nice block printing class so that people could do their own block print, and then I was going to teach a sewing class the next week so students could turn that block print into pillows. But that's pushed back to the end of May, maybe June. So just keep an eye out. If you go to my website, thehomeroomshop.com, sign up for my email because I will be sending out updates on everything, and also lots and lots of other freebies. And I have a lot of video that I haven't even edited yet that I will put online and give the links to of projects I've done. Also projects I did years ago, and I've had all this video just sitting in these virtual vaults, digital vaults. So I think that's everything. Again, I know there's a million things I could have told you and I should have told you. If you have any questions, ask me. I love to share this. Love it. So thank you, Indie Mavens. Come by and see me. and stay safe and stay covered up. Okay? Now I have to walk around here because I'm the only one here, so I've got to go turn this off.